2x2, 7 rows deep, and rolling up to the start-finish line. Looks like Asher going a little bit off track as the inside.
As they can. Saber making an amazing dive into turn one, and electroshocks off. Eggful gets the move.
But MNU trying to take a move.
Big contact from 5 different punches.
Big incident with Snowdog, our leader.
As we head into town row, it's a big crash. It's a big crash between the two title contenders.
Hello and welcome everyone to our next round of the Simufur GT4 series. We take you all the ways over to round 3 at Misano, the Misano World Circuit Marco Simoncelli that is located right next to the beautiful city of Misano Adriatico. It is going to be a very, very dramatic round as we expect the GT4s to come out in force. A very technical track filled with lots of twists and turns. I am joined by Wolfin Foxdale, and we are going to be bringing you through all of the steps to take us through the Italian Grand Prix of Misano Simoncelli.
Super excited to be here. It is very wet today. Forecast does predict that it's going to be nothing but rain the entire race, and as you can see on the screen, it is very, very wet as we follow along now with Allraz as they are making their practice runs, getting ready for qualifying, which will be starting fairly soon. Super excited. I know normally I would be racing this, but I decided that for this one, maybe it'd be nice to kind of take something different today. So here I am.
Yeah, we know all drivers fear the wet a little bit, so we welcome you in with open arms. But yeah, a very, very challenging race for certain. It's Misano, it proves to be one of the more unique challenges, especially these GT4 cars. A lot of long, sweeping corners, and traditionally not everyone's favorite car. And we're going to have a bit of rain to spice it up. It's going to really prove to be a challenge, especially coming back through here. The 10, 11, 12, and 13 section, a very high-speed section, as we see a four-course yellow come pop up on screen. All of our drivers taking the time in practice to practice our pre-race procedures and just make sure that everyone is aware of what we are trying to do out on track. But yeah, I think this 11, 12, 13 section will probably be one place that will cause a lot of chaos in these GT4s. It's already quite high-strung for these heavy, non-aero dependent machines, and the rain's only going to throw a bigger spanner in that works.
I agree. I did admittedly try a little bit of practice in the wet here. It is very, very sketchy, especially in the Mercedes. As we follow along now with Charter, who's making his runs. So far, obviously the full course yellow is going to horrifically offset times, so we're gonna have to wait a little bit later to see where people stand. I'm gonna be honest. I feel like the biggest advantage for this circuit is going to be the Janettas, and there are two of them here, one of them being Allraz and then the other one being I think it was Sururami. And sorry, we're now following along with Suzuka, aka Indigo Lopez, heading down the main straight. This will be completing their lap, and that's going to put them P2. An AM driver, though, surprisingly, has set the fastest lap, Ragnar. But, you know, it's early, it's only practice, so we'll just have to wait and see. It is very wet out there, so, you know, unpredictable conditions.
Yeah, the wet will throw up a lot of things. Practice is also traditionally quite short. We'll only really give the drivers enough time to just get acquainted with the conditions out on track, and certainly not enough time to go out and maximize their practiced attempts and make sure that they have the best lap down. But whereas Lopez just came through and set the fastest lap, you were talking about the Genetis likely having a pretty good advantage at 153.1 compared to the next fastest time of a 158.0. Well, played with Kagekyo just snuck in a 153.4. So the advantage is not as great as it previously looked. I mean, a previous gap of 5 seconds down to 2/10 is a little bit of a step up, but I think it's really just everyone's getting accustomed to the wet weather, how wet it actually is going to be here as ACC does cycle through different stages of wets. Our drivers may be practicing on a slightly different degree of wetness. Previously, this is like with Kagekyo running through the 4-5-6 complex, a very tricky complex, and I think we're going to see possibly the danger of some drive-throughs coming through this track, as 6 on entry and exit is quite notorious for giving a few off-track warnings, and you don't have too many to work with in ACC as compared to some of the other sims out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing you also need to consider is there's so much of the smooth painted tarmac on the outside of a lot of these corners. You wind up going a little bit wide, especially in some of those heavy braking areas. That's going to be really, really sketchy, if not cause a incident and possibly end your race. I will say, to the advantage of the drivers, this is a bit of a smaller field for today's race, so I don't foresee us having a large incident, but it definitely doesn't mean that we can't have a incident where a few cars can be involved because of something like that. It's going to come down to what happens later down the line when we get into the race itself, or even during qualifying.
Yeah, it will be quite interesting. Electroshock actually just posting in the best time of 152.255, so that Alpine looking like a duck in a pond as it floats through the opening sector of this Misano circuit. It'll be really interesting. I'm curious to see who will have the biggest advantage. I'm noting when looking through our list actually a notable lack of pros that are going to be probably shifting around our overall standings and our battle at the top. Even a lack of our golds as well, currently missing quite a bit of the top end of the grid. So the silvers and the Ams are going to really have a chance to step up into the fight here and maybe unsettle the overall standings a little bit. Possibly, depending what's going on, we could even see a silver or an Am take the overall win if their cards are played right.
I'd be shocked, but you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if we did see it happen. And speaking of championship leaders, this is somebody definitely in contention for the championship lead, and that is Luis Alfonso heading down, I believe this is the back straight, heading into the very sharp right-hander. They had a fairly rough race going into they had a great race, going into Bathurst. They won it. Very easy cruise for them. However, there was nothing but chaos in the backfield. I admittedly was part of that chaos. I'm not going to lie. But if they don't really have a lot of competition, they're able to kind of roll through, then I think they'll do well. Now we're following along with the AM championship leader, and that is Frey Fireblood. I will admit it was going to be interesting to see if maybe we could, Frey and I could maybe get a 1-2 in this championship. But as we say that, the practice has ended, and we have now entered qualifying, which means for qualifying we will have the silvers and AMs and nationals be going out first for the first 10 minutes of qualifying, followed by the golds and pros. And because of the, I I'd say, large amount of silvers and AMs. The pros are going to have a very nice running of things, while in silvers and AMs, it's going to be complicated. It's definitely going to be complicated for them because they've got a lot more traffic to deal with.
It does prove a bit of a challenge. I mean, this is a longer circuit still, so I don't expect to be too many issues. It is a 2.62 mile circuit, so plenty of space for these drivers to kind of filter out into. And plus, with the wet weather, the cars slow down a little bit, and the gaps open up just a little bit more. So I don't think there's too much concern for any of these drivers unless you get a bit careless. But I do think there is a concern of being able to lay down a perfect lap, as the wet weather always likes to throw up a bit of challenges, and it certainly is going to try to unsettle the order of this grid. You don't tend to have as much time practicing the wet weather conditions, and I think it's going to just be a matter of who can maximize the car through the corners here.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's really, the wet weather is basically the giant monkey wrench in this race. You don't know who's going to come out on top because, well, you need to set up a perfect race for that to happen first, or a perfect lap to happen first. And if you just make, even if you're just like a millimeter off, then you just hit like a little bit of that wet tarmac, that could cost you so much time. And at the end of the day, that's not obviously what you want. And scary enough, it could also ruin your race or your qualifying by causing you to have a big spin or something like that. And right now, we're following along with Molres as he comes down the main straight, heading into turn 1, and then into the sharp left-hander going into turn 2, following up, going into turn 3 and 4. It's not as bad, but then you're going to immediately run into this open tarmac, heading down toward the turn 4, as now very slow speeds, very sharp turn, very long straight. So far so good. I'm looking at the clock on board. Looks like so far so good. Now heading down for another sharp break, going into turn 6. Now letting the car go out a little bit wide, just not too wide, but whenever there is painted tarmac right there, now setting himself up for the next corner. It's a bit deceptive because it's actually 2 turns. This is now turn, I believe this is turn 8, turn 9. You can see him really struggling with the wheel heading out of the corner, but managed to keep it going. Now heading down the back straight, heading toward the toward curve 1. I believe this is what it's called. Forgive me, my Italian is not that amazing. So anyone that is Italian, if I offended it, I greatly apologize. Now hard braking, going into Curva del Caro. Then only 2 corners left. This will be now heading down to Curva Misano, and that's going to be let's see where they come out. It's going to be pretty good. 151.2. Not bad at all.
A solid time from Orez. We saw Orez sneak in and was fighting amongst the pros in Bathurst in a very hamstrung Ginetta, I think is the nicest way to say it, being down 30 to 40 kilometers an hour on the straightaways, just due to the fact that the Ginetta does not have that extra gear, quite literally missing an extra gear and kind of stuck in, I believe, 260 Ks, possibly even lower. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, but car makes up for it for being very, very agile in the corners. It just really struggles on those long straights. So Orez performing very, very well right now, especially with good form off of that Bathurst class win and almost overall podium. So it'd be very interesting to see how they are able to carry things out. As we take a look, we have a couple other our drivers, George Chuarmi, I believe that is
Surami, yeah.
Not in my vocabulary, at least.
We're bad at names. Please forgive the driver driving this. Please forgive us if we horrifically botched your name. They are now running a fairly decent time. I believe they are now entering Curva de Misano, so this will complete their lap. No, this is Curva de Misano. I'm sorry, the angle was a bit odd. So far, so good. This looks like it's going to be a very fast time, and it is going to be it did not set. It looks like they might have gone off somewhere because it did not come up on our timing screen. So I think they might have gone off at some point, and looks like they're going to have to try again.
Yeah, kind of the threat of coming through Misano. We have a possible improvement here from Blade, and it will be an improvement of about half a second here from, or down to 152.4. So a good improvement from Blade, and I think we're going to keep seeing these times dropping just a little bit as we enter the final 4 minutes of qualifying here. I see a couple drivers also on some good improvements down our grid, some very large improvements as well. I see Frey Fireblood on a big improvement. Blade Wolf's already on a very large improvement, half a tenth up through Sector 1. And we have a car stopped on the outside there. That's Jax Wilson, who possibly had a little bit of a moment waiting for the cars to pass through before they rejoin there at turn 8 and getting ready to set another lap as they enter the back straight coming out of turn 10. So yeah, it'll be interesting. We only really have 7 cars right now that have set a lap. We still have 4 that need to get one in, and then we have several others that are on quite large improvements. That pole time has dropped from, or has dropped all the ways to a 150.660. Charter now passing the line for their a good lap of a 151.735, and the Audi, a notoriously difficult car to drive in GT4, but looking like Charter has a pretty good grasp on it in these wet conditions.
Yeah, I mean, so far it is the Silvers, setting pace. There are a couple outliers. I mean, look at Frey Fireblood. They are currently 4th in a literal sandwich of Silvers. Their best time was a 152.3, so they are not too far off the pace. They are definitely the fastest AM with that time by a long shot. Looking at the times now, it's almost 3/10. So Frey's at the moment got this in the bag. They've told me that this is a track that they've loved. They've tried to win here before in previous years. They just never had the luck. I think today in this wet weather, it may be the day for Frey Fireblood to finally get that class win here at Misano.
Yeah, it's looking like a decent day for Frey. We did have a bit of a sketchy moment coming out of 10, so did lose their improvements, but I believe that they're absolutely going to be able to chase that down as they were already up quite a bit. Just a little bit too much curb on the exit as Elias Flynn is now flying through in the Camaro. One of 2 Camaros that is on our grid today as we come out of the turn 5-6 complex onto our first main straightaway here, and it looks like our Camaros might be paired up. So coming together, and as we roll out of the final corner, not the front straight, I apologize, is going to be a jump up always to P4, a 152 flat. So it'll be a good improvement from Flynn, and it's going to be while the Camaros continuing to work together, but actually Flynn electing to close out their lap. So that will be the end of their lap. 40 seconds to go here. Everyone crossing the line will be starting their final lap here, and anyone that crosses the line after 10 minutes will have their final lap in the books, as we will transition over to our pro and gold qualifying.
Yeah, and as we were talking, Orez once again improving on their time, a 150.4, absolutely stellar time. I mean, we were kind of wondering about that, and it almost looked like it wasn't, but Orez has been with this Janetta every GT4 series. They've gotten so much better with it, and it is definitely showing dividends here. Top 4. a top 4 earlier, and I'm going to be real. I'm super excited to see where this goes, as we just got the call. Golds and silvers our golds and pros have now been cleared to leave, and the first 2 out, I would say, well, it was Cerebine and Indigo, but something happened, and they have now pulled off to the side of the road. We are now following along with Charter. They are on a pretty good improvement, and they were on a good improvement. It looks like it has unfortunately dropped down. Is it going to be enough to keep their position, though? They are now heading down, curving to Misano, heading down toward the main straight, and it looks like, is it going to be any improvement? No.
Yeah, so closing up our silvers and AMs, we have Simone Bellon, who is our local hero, it looks like, sneaking in with the Janetta. So going to be interesting to see what time they can set here, as they failed to set a time so far. Likely just track limits are quite traumatizing here, to say the least. They have also they left the pits quite late, so only had about the back half of qualifying here as we head through the 10, 11, tip it into 12, set the car up for 13 under the brakes, and possibly get this car set up for the final run out of 14 cattle corner, and try to get the car out using a little bit of curb here. Always a little bit of a risk coming through on the rain and trying to put the car on the curbs. Through the final corner into 16. Looks like the car is very compliant coming through and out of the corner. It's going to be, I believe, yes, it's going to be an invalid lap. So,
they are pro.
Okay, so news coming through that our standings are incorrect, that Simone is not an AM, to say the least. They are misclassified, but they are a pro driver, which makes more sense why they've been in the pits for so long. As we roll onto the main straight with the 314 Escargot Janetta running out of turn 6, looking like a good exit. You can see the rear end wobbling around a little bit as we throw the car into turn 8. Very, very easy corner to get wrong. Just need to get the rear end through that section. Again, using all of the curb. Again, a little bit of a risk on the wet weather as we tip into the braking of 9, setting the car up for 10. And a late apex is always going to be your priority here. Looks like possibly a little bit early on that apex running out. And take a look on board as we tip it into 11, 12, and 13. We talked about this being a high-strung corner for the GT4s, using all of the track width, getting the car hard on the brakes for 13 on the apex of 12, pretty much, setting the car up for Corvicado into turn 14. Ooh, a lot of understeers. They took an early apex on board here. Set it up for 15. Should be a nearly full throttle corner just to get the car tipped in. A little bit of oversteer, and then hard on the brakes at that 50-meter board to set the car up for the final corner. Early on the throttle to kick the rear around, and it's going to be all eyes up to the meter board to see what time is set, and it's going to be the fastest lap immediately at the first time of asking, a 150.067. So Simone is immediately putting their authority onto this qualifying session, and surely we're going to see only further improvements from them.
Absolutely, that was an insane lap. We've been saying the Janettas have had a much better time than some of the other cars, as we follow along now with Luis Alfonso as they go insanely wide. That unfortunately is going to be a track limit. They are going to have 5 minutes to set a time. I've been looking at the times. The only other person that is a pro or a gold that has set a time is Indigo Lopez. Oh, as I say that, another one, Tabernator. I am probably saying that wrong. Please forgive me. The 83 McLaren has just set a time. They are third fastest behind Olraz. We were saying earlier that the wet weather was going to be a factor, and you could definitely see it now.
Yeah, those Janettas, the nimble, lightest GT4 on our grid, is really proving to take it to the water quite nicely. The Circuit Misano suits the car very well to begin with, but also just the fact that this weather kind of dampens the power deficit that they tend to deal with. Is going to really play in their favor as Daniel Taverner is taking the car through turn 8, tipping it out of the turn 9. So looking for a big improvement. Currently sitting 6/10 off of that pole time, but we've seen Taverner be in the conversation for the majority of our races, at least pushing their name into the forefront. Sometimes missing out just a little bit. Bathurst wasn't the strongest race for them compared to Watkins Glen, but still a very strong event for sure, as we have to appreciate the effort that they've been putting into to really make that step up to the top end of the grid. Tipping the car now into our final sector here. It looks like it's been well put together here, so this could be quite a large improvement from Taverner as we tip it into the final 2 lefts of the circuit. Very easy to get wrong and throw away a lot of time here, and the sectors aren't looking too good in this final one, and it could be a little bit of time lost. They will still improve on their lap time by just about 1/10 of a second, but that final sector really hurt their lap time.
Yeah, absolutely. They were definitely sliding around. The McLaren has had a lot of problems with like these tighter courses, and at the moment it's just a matter of just trying to fight that, because you also need to the other thing that is struggling with them, they don't have as much setup options as say the Mercedes or the Ginetta. The settings to make adjustments to kind of make the car more comfortable or be able to push, especially in weather like this, it's almost impossible. Like, you can't even change the brake bias in that car, if I remember right. And that could really affect you trying to really push these cars to their optimum, like the optimum times. And you were basically at a disadvantage, but Taverner was doing very well, like putting the car in P3. Following along now with Indigo Lopez, they are just finishing their lap as they head down the main straight. This could be a pretty good improvement. Let's see where it comes out. And no, it was an improvement. No, it was not an improvement. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong Louis driver. They are still in 6th place.
And our pros haven't made too much progress to the front end of the grid. We talked about there only really being 3 of them here, so or 4 of them here, with Simone putting their lap time down. So really going to be a challenge to get to the front here in these wet weather conditions, where we see some good sectors coming in from Luis Alfonso in the number 57. They try to tip that Mercedes into our final sector here. We've seen this already unsettle quite a few lap times, so it'll be interesting to see how we get it out of here. Luis has had kind of a little bit of up and down season, but we know that their pace is extremely strong. So one more corner to navigate and possibly banking in a very strong time, and Mercedes look quite well hooked up coming through that final corner. So it's just the final run to the line, and that will be an improvement all the ways up to P2, a 150.387. So very well done by the number 57, but still 3/10 of drift of Simone Bellon, who has really proven that Ginetta is just very well suited for them on this Misano circuit.
I mean, it's a lightweight, very lightweight, very pointy car, and if my memory serves right, this is one of the top Italian rally drivers in WRC, in the virtual WRC scene. It does not shock me in the slightest that they're having a good time here, in not only in the Ginetta, but just in this wet weather in general. It's just something they're accustomed to, used to cars being very on the edge, being very loose, getting through the corners, even in a slide. So I feel like, now I could be wrong, that Bellon will have a significant advantage, not only being in the Ginetta, but just in these settings, or just in these conditions in general, because of the fact that it's just, if you're used to like very unstable conditions or stuff like that, you just basically have an advantage.
Yeah, it still requires quite a bit of skilled pilot, though. It is not all down to the car. Its lightweight nature also does make it a bit more of a handful because the car is more willing to throw itself around, and when it does go around, it's a bit more sudden. The weight doesn't kind of dampen those swings as we are in our final lap of qualifying here. Simone, who has already pretty much banked their qualifying time. No one was able to best it. They are now the only car back out on track. Trying to make an improvement, currently sitting quite level on our first sector here as we get tipped into 10 here. We saw them struggle a little bit coming through turn 10 last time out. Looks like it will be quite a bit the same. Actually, I'm looking like a possibly bad exit for them. So everything to be gained in the final sector as we throw it through 11 with such a beautiful quarter in these cars. 12 as well, hard on the brakes, again pretty much on the apex as Simone tips the car in to Curvacaro at turn 14. See if the Genetic can get itself out of here and with a good time, but that first lap time proved to be very, very dominant. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to match it. A little bit of a slide coming out of turn 15 in for one last tour of turn 16. So May Bellon is going to be trying to throw that Janetta out onto the main straightaway here. Does not look like we are going to get an improvement, but does not matter regardless, as Simone was able to secure that pole position with that first flying lap, that 150.0 that we saw them lay down. But Daniel Tabaner snuck back in exactly 1/10 back, was a 150.167. So all of it to play for in the race. And of course, a good shout out to Ores Volpez, who was able to sneak that silver pole position as well. And again, put themselves in the conversation for a possible win if you see a little bit of chaos.
Yeah, I agree. Hats off to Ores. They've been down the barrel of this before. This isn't the first time. They were just doing this the last race here at Bathurst, and they are now poised to do it again. I am super excited. These Janetta, like we said, these Janettas have been doing fairly well. Hats off to Luis Alfonso, P3, and Tabernator for getting P2. This will also technically give the 83 a pole in gold, because I believe they are gold. So they will be now leading the pole in gold, and Alfonso will have a little bit of a rough time on their hands, because now they have to deal with not only a fellow blue, well, they will have to deal with a fellow Blue E driver, but Simon Bellion as well. So it's going to be an interesting race. I'm pretty excited for this one.
Yeah, it'll be a very, very interesting race. The rain will also, of course, throw its usual chaos into the books, but taking a look at what we have ahead of us, I mean, we have a certain lead battle. We have class battles that are going to be all over the track. And of course, we have the overall championship battle. This is the end of the first half of the championship once we reach the conclusion of Misano. So it will be interesting to see what that halfway point brings, where it sets us up for the second half of this championship, especially as this is going to be a race that we are missing quite a few of our championship challengers. So it's a good chance for a lot of people to step up and try to take their place and make sure that they are there to benefit from their absence.
Absolutely, and so far it definitely looks like for the overall, Louise definitely have the run of things. They've already gotten a win at Bathurst. All they really need to do is do well here, and this will all they have to really do is secure even a P3. I think would give them the lead in the championship by a fair margin, with the absence of R. Kelly. So this is setting up to be a very interesting race, especially if, say, R. Kelly comes back in the next race.
Yeah, I mean, we do still have our drop round, but missing Robbie is going to be a very big change up for what we are used to. We're used to seeing Robbie being near the front of that field and really fighting everything. But as we take a walk back through, we know that Simone Bellon is taking the home field advantage to heart and taking a Italian pole position in the Italian circuit. They're going to be joined on row 1 with Daniel Taverner taking that McLaren and taking the lead with the gaggle of blue e-cars as we see in the background. Transferring back to row 2, Luis Alfonso and that Mercedes, the number 57, has managed to sneak their way on to position 3, and they're going to be sharing that with our silver pole position of Orez Volpez in the 406 Janetta. And taking a look back at someone that we aren't too unfamiliar with, Electroshocks in the 75 Alpine has managed their way on the inside line of row 3, and they're going to be joined by Inigo Lopez in the 423, the other Blue E Mercedes. They are going to be starting on the outside of that third row. Blade Wolf Kagekio in the 142 is going to be on the inside of row 4. The Aston Martin, the lead Aston Martin, I believe here, is going to be running away with it with Charter on their outside, the 24 Audi. Again, very handful of a car, but a good result from them. That will be your silver podium battle right there as we look ahead to Elias Flynn, who's taking the inside of row 10. The lead Chevrolet Camaro, they're going to be joined by, I believe, our first Porsche of Jesper Swingley with the missing texture blender Porsche. And then going back to Frey Fireblood in the 26 inside and position 11. They are going to be an all Aston front row with George Surami in the number 10 Aston Martin, I believe, making their Simufur debut, if I am not mistaken. I am not familiar with the name too much. As we lean back, we have a third Aston in a row, Jax Wilson taking the number 79 to P13 as well, then joined with the second Porsche of Juan Manuel Veron, who is going to be taking the 911 Porsche into position 14. Our final Camaro, Cohen Van Hove, is going to be starting on that back row inside line. They are going to be joined by Race Dragon Ragnar in our final Aston Martin, who did not set a time of qualifying, but will be looking to make a big charge to the front of the field. I'll be interested to follow their progress as we file through things.
Yeah, the very interesting grid. It's very mixed. That's what I find very interesting about this race. So many drivers are very mixed in with other class drivers that they normally wouldn't be with. The 83 David Taverner for in P2, their goal normally under normal conditions they would be kind of in the midfield, but here they are sitting in P2. That's going to be a huge advantage, especially since they have the running mate of Luis Alfonso. This could work out for the two of them. They may be able to get the jump on Simon if they're lucky, if they work together. Followed by another big one, the big silver or the big silver sandwich of A. Flynn and Frey Fireblood. They are kind of in a bit of a rough spot as well. They're surrounded by silvers as well. So it'll really depend on how well their starts go and how well they're able to keep the first few laps going as we head down toward the back stretch. This is going to be very, very interesting. I am super, super excited for this.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting for sure. Orez Volpez, I think, is looking to get some big gains coming through here. That Janetta is going to be a very, very strong contender in that first sector. And looking at the sectors from Simone, very, very strong in the third sector as well by multiple tenths. So you could see quite a few moves coming in from the 406, possibly even letting them challenge all the ways up to that overall podium. All they need to do is gain one position off the start, and they are in that prime position as we look further down the grid. The lights starting to disappear in the showers, starting to make it a little bit hard to see these cars, as now we have 14 cars rolling all at once. The rain really does prove to be a challenge here. So these opening laps, you're going to see some drivers have to struggle with the vision and what they're able to see. It'll be very, very interesting to see who's able to cope with that the best. So we have all of our cars 7 rows deep. We're going to be filing through the final corner curve at Misano, as each of our drivers are going to be looking up to that start line, making sure they are following those start lane procedures and trying to spot those 5 red lights through the spray of each of the cars directly ahead of them. Setting up, we are going to be green, green, green as we roll down into turn 1 at World Circuit Misano Simoncelli as we roll through. All of our drivers already filing with single file, so not many challenges. We have one move in the back there that looks like a couple drivers trying to fight through. Elias Flynn, the 77, sneaking on the inside of Swingley and into the first hard braking zone of the lap. That's going to be turn 4, trying move on the inside. Frey Fireblood, and actually another further contact from, I believe that was the number 10. One of our other Aston Martins, George Shuarmi, is going to be filing through in a big slide from Frey Fireblood going onto the main straight here as we roll through the kink of 7 and into the next real corner of turn 8. It looks like Jesper's looking like a Porsche on Porsche battle now into the inside of Frey Fireblood, and another set of contacts. So Frey being thrown around. Jesper, I think, has had a half spin there, losing several positions. And so Frey is already getting pinballed around here as we settle through that first lap. I think most of our drivers now starting to set up and get into that single file rhythm, but very deep in the 10 for several of our other drivers. That's going to only open them up to further attack, but you can see the battle scars already accumulating on that back of that blue Aston Martin's wing. As we take a look backwards into turn 10, yes, finally all of our drivers are single file there. Yes, we're swinging, starting to push Juan Verone through this back kink section, and again, very, very tricky section for these GT4 cars, but damage, I'm sure it's even trickier.
Yeah, absolutely. That is super unfortunate for Frey, but they kept it. The one positive I think we can get out of that is that they kept it facing forward. Even though they've got damage, they still are in a good spot as the first lap goes around, and it's surprising, and not surprisingly, Simon Bellion with the purple lap of the first lap of the race. To go back to Frey, it's super unfortunate, but the one positive they can get is that even though they were kind of pinballed around, they didn't spin. That's really all that matters at this point, because it really keeps them in the fight. So really at the end of the day, like, if you think about it, Frey doesn't need to risk too much. The people, like, as far as championship wise, all they need to do really is finish. I don't think any of the main championship contenders are in this race. So really all they have to do is drive. If they do well, then that's just free points for them.
But another driver that we were talking about earlier, Orez Lopez, has fallen behind Electroshocks. That Alpine has managed to find their way in front of the Ginetta and is now proving to be a little bit of a thorn in their side. The Alpine is going to be one of the cars that can actually start to challenge the Ginetta, but Electroshocks is very, very deep into turn 9, setting up for 10, and they're off wide, able to bring the car back. Very easy to hit the water on the outside there and aquaplane off into the gravel, so well controlled by Electroshocks, but that's going to be benefiting Orez, who now has about a 2-second gap to climb back up to Luis Alfonso in that overall podium battle, as Jesper Swingley is now trying to put a move onto the inside of turn 10 or turn 11 here. Going to be both of our Porsche side by side. You can see very, very differing lines as the 911 is going to be all the ways on the outside of the track.
Oh, that's contact!
And very well held by the 279. Able to sneak another position from the Camaro ahead as well, who is taking a little bit of avoiding action. And I believe the 911 Porsche of Juan is going to also be able to sneak their way through. So Cohen has had their eyes wide open trying to avoid that incident, but very well held from the 279 Jesper, who was able to collect another position.
Yeah, we're going to watch that. Like, please bring this back up again, because that was absolutely insane. Here we go, we're on board with Fonzie heading down the main straight, heading towards Turbo 1. They go insanely wide, going into the corner, and then as they come in, they just miss their braking mark, right? They get right here, and they just touch. Normally that would be a death sentence for Swingley, but no, they just managed to save the car, and not only that, they use it to steal position. That is just insane.
very, very well done from the 279 who was able to collect that. We'll have probably a little bit of rear damage, but we've seen that Frey was able to control that very well when they took their damage on lap 1, so I don't think it'll be too much of a problem for Jesper, who is now starting to make a little bit of progress through the field. Koen Verhoeven is going to be rolling through and possibly losing another position there to, I believe that is Jax Wilson, who is in the Aston Martin taking a move into turn 8. So Koen's trying to bring this Camaro back up. Oh, and actually Jack's a little bit wide in the background there, so Koen's going to be able to sneak their way back through. We talked about earlier when electroshocks went off, very easy to aquaplane out into that gravel, and I think that's exactly what just happened. A little bit wide, and as soon as you touch that painted surface, there's zero grip until you get stopped by that gravel on the outside of that track surface.
Yeah, and it's super unfortunate as we follow along now with the battle between George Sirwami, and I believe that is Frey Fireblood, heading down toward the main straight. They're fairly close, and oh no, Frey goes a little bit wide. This could be the moment for George Sawami as they head right into the back of Frey. It is the battle of the Brits here as they head down toward the inside. Frey again very wide going into turn 1, but Sarami keeping it cool, keeping it clean, heading down into turn 3. No move yet. It looks like they're just trying to find an opening. They're getting very close, but they just can't seem to find the door.
Yeah, it's a very hard thing to do in that first sector. Frey looks like got a very, very good exit, exiting out of 6, and was able to put a little bit of a gap onto George, so that number 10 has to wait another corner here. They turn 8, one of the best overtaking opportunities, but they aren't going to be able to spot an opening if they're able to even spot anything with that spray being kicked up by the 26 directly in front of them. As we roll through this, when one of the challenging parts of the track, turn 9 and turn 10, has thrown a lot of drivers off circuit here. So George pushing very, very deep and actually able to close that gap a little bit to the 26 and maybe set something up for this back straightaway as we go back down to turn 11 here. Looks like Frey is going to need to be locked into their mirrors as we hit the brakes, setting the car up for 13 because George might be looking for some kind of move here. The 26 setting it up, pilot into that outside or all over the curbs and really using all the track space to try to open up any opportunity here. But you can see that that Aston Martin directly behind them, the number 10, just inching forward lap by lap as the fastest lap is set by Simone Bellon, who is set at 150.2, so missing a little bit of time on their qualifying, but only by a tenth as we have a couple of drivers going a little slow. Riestrag and Ragnar going a little wide there as Juan Perón sneaks through, so the 31 dropping a position to the 911 and setting themselves up and possibly even an incident, I believe, from these two. We'll take a quick look back at that via roll through again this very, very tricky section, the 31 Aston Martin of Ragnar Racing. Oh, and very, very deep, a big slide and able to collect it on the road, just slowing the car down enough to make sure that they weren't going to spin them around. So very, very well held by Ragnar, who's able to collect that car, easy to spin and lose the rear end of the car there as well and send it all the way to the barrier. So a good, very well held save from the 31.
Yeah, beautiful save. That could have ended in tears for a lot of people, but Ragnar was able to hold it as we follow along now with Simon Bellion, who's had a fairly quiet race. They do have David Taberner right behind them, but they aren't really in a position to kind of push and make a move. So right now, the two of them have just been kind of cruising and making a gap as we see Simon go a little bit wide going out of the corner, but I don't think it's going to matter too much. They're heading down toward Curve de Misano, the last corner, and I think the gap has closed a little bit, but I don't think it's by too much. Heading down the main straight, and right now, it definitely looks like okay, I guess even with that wide, they set the fastest lap again, a 150.127, and then it is immediately followed by Daniel Taberner, 150.107. It's definitely getting interesting as we follow along with Ragnar, who again goes wide, trying to make a move. They've been having a lot of trouble getting that corner right, it seems. But so far, they're definitely still in a mix as they have, I believe that is Jay Wilson behind them. So they need to be careful of that. If they keep going wide, it could open the door for Wilson as we head down the main straight on board with Jax Wilson as they head down toward turn 1. You can see there is nothing. They cannot see a thing heading down into the corner as they head down into turn 2. Following along, and I don't really see, like, how can you see as we see Ragnar go insanely? That was, I think they got loose or something, but they almost collided with Jax Wilson. And Ragnar almost collided with Jax Wilson, but thankfully they were able to hold it.
Yeah, well held by the two Aston Martins, and another big slide from Ragnar at the background there, so that Aston Martin really proving to be a handful for them as we run into this wet weather. Taking a look back up to the 404 Conrad Hugo, who's been chased down by the Porsche, the 911 of Juan Verón, who is now looking to make some kind of move with that Porsche. The Camaro looking a bit cumbersome in the wet weather. I must say, the car just looks like it is quite a bit of a hard car to get turned through these wet weather conditions here, but the 404 piloting quite well to get it through the lap, and it looks like it's starting to open that gap up a little bit to Jesper Swingley as well. So going to be closing up. The gap is actually sitting at about 16 seconds here. There's a little bit of a wiggle on the entry for the 404, but nothing too scary for the Camaro. Used to a little bit of sliding here, but they are not used to having the pressure from that 911 behind me, who's just starting to sneak up. And speaking of pressure as well, the number 10 of George Shirarmi is going to be closing up and putting pressure onto the back of Frey Fireblood here. So another Aston v Aston battle as that gap is down all the ways to 3/10 entering the end of the first sector here as we set the cars up for turn 4, tip it back into turn 5, and then have to change directions into 6. This is where we saw Frey get a better exit and open up that gap, and I think that might stay true again as George had just the tiniest slide coming out of that corner. So they aren't going to get the run that they need on the Frey Fireblood, but it's going to still allow or push Frey into defensive position, and a big dive from George looking to fill the gap. Are they able to keep it on track? They are, but a cut back from Frey Fireblood allows them to secure that position back. But George now putting Frey under heavy threat to try to take that position deep under the brakes to close it all the way up to just a car length and trying to get the best exit they can. It looks about equal, but possibly that curve just taking away a little bit of the traction. Frey is deep under threat now as the number 10 really trying to promote themselves from P10 all the way up to 9th. Frey is going to have to keep their eyes locked in the mirrors hard on the brakes to 12 and looking is George, but a little bit deep. Did they go wide? Frey with a little bit of a wiggle. That's going to open the window up for Jesper Swingley in the background and now close up to the rear of both of them.
Yeah, I was about to say, look behind. That is Jesper Swingley. They are taking full advantage of this fight as they head down toward Kirby and Misano. It looks like Ragnar or George Swami has gone a little bit wide again. It is now opened the door for Swingley to try to make a move, and that is going to make this not just a two-way fight, but now a three-way fight heading down into turn 1. And as we follow on now, it looks like there's trouble with Jax. I don't know. We don't know what happened. Yeah, it looks like they were in a three-way fight, and unfortunately, they were they got the bad stick as far as that fight went, and unfortunately, were shoved wide. As we now head back to Swingley, as we see that's Ragnar wide. Unfortunately, that's going to give Swingley the position, and now I think that's going to give Frey a sigh of relief. And I say that, oh no, that's Frey. It's spun going out of the corner. It looks like, oh yeah, that's heavy damage. It looks like they hit the wall pretty hard.
We talked about the threat of turn 6 and the dangers that it can pose immediately for off tracks, but with all the curb riding you need to do, I'm sure that might have played a part here as we roll through the end of the first sector here. Frey's been very, very good, but very high commitment through this section. A lot of curb on the inside, and the car just settling all on that curb, and it's just too little grip out there for the 26 to hang on, and the rear end just continues to rotate around, and there's nothing you can do once that rear starts to over-rotate on that very, very slick surface. So quite a bit of damage we see on that front of that 26. Shirley's going to try to carry it for the next 5 minutes as we try to carry on to the pit lane, or the pit window, as Simone Bella now sets the fastest lap of 149.9, so even faster than their qualifying times now, and really starting to stamp their authority on this race. But Frey Fireblood now having to pray for the next 4 minutes to go smoothly as that pit window opens in the end of the first 20-minute period. It will be open for 20 minutes. Does not require a tire change, but does require a fuel stop for these cars, and that is going to be time restricted to at least 25 seconds here. So opens up some opportunity for some strategy as well. We'll see if any drivers take any tires, because the sliding could be chewing up these very soft wet weather tires, but it will be a bit of an interesting one to see if any strategies sneak out of that, as a couple of our battles here are starting to fire up a little bit more. Koen Verhoeven is now under pressure from the Aston Martin directly behind them of Ragnar, trying to sneak their way up past a very, very large Camaro, I must say, trying to just trundle their way through the first sector. Koen is leaving that door open, and Ragnar is looking to step right through it as we trickle through turn 2 into the long sweeper of turn 3. That Camaro looking like it really doesn't want to get that front end tipped into the corner, and then set up to the end of the first sector here. Ragnar looking to possibly sneak their way in, a little tentative on the brakes, unsure if Koen was going to close the door, but now Koen has a very tight line for turn 6, and Ragnar trying to sneak their way back underneath, able to get back under, and I think this will open an opportunity as we go through the kink of 7 and very far to the inside as we set up for 8, but Koen not able to get the car stopped as fast. Ragnar able to feed their way through, and that is one more car of Jax Wilson who is able to try to take advantage of it in turn 8, but that's going to carry on down into turn 9. Koen has the inside. Is the Aston Martin able to sneak around the outside? And it is. They're able to clear them by that apex. Koen now on the back of these two Aston Martins and needs to find a way to get back up through them.
Yeah, very tight battle going on in the back of the field, and that was pretty nuts. But unfortunately, this fight is still not over, even though Ragnar's in the lead of this little pack here. Unfortunately, now he has to deal with Jax again. Look at them, they are right bumper to bumper as we follow along now with Jax Wilson. They are right at the back bumper of Ragnar, and so far it looks like Ragnar's just trying to maybe see if Ragnar will make it, or Ragnar will make a mistake, and so far it's still not at the moment. But you can see Jax goes insanely wide going out of the last corner, and then they have to let Koen by, and that's going to cost them so much time heading down into turn 1. And I think that is going to breathe a sigh of relief for Koen, because now they can focus on trying to get back up and fight Ragnar again for another round, as we have our first, I believe that was our first track limits warning. I saw something ping up on my map, and right now following along with Koen, heading down into, I believe this is going to be toward, the first of one of the two long main stretches, as Koen gets really, really loose going out of the corner. That's going to cost them time as they try to catch up. Heading down the main straight, they're going to try to do everything they can, use the power of that Camaro to head down into the corner, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I think this fight for now is calmed down as we follow along now with Simon Bellion heading down toward the main straight. So far, they've had a pretty quiet race, and the gap has increased to 4 and almost 5 seconds. Simon just doing his thing, and it's been working very well for him.
Yes, Simon, there's some been strong as they have gone through really any discipline. So not the biggest shock to see them performing so well in the 314. So very, very good effort from them, and opened that gap up to about 5 seconds to Daniel Taberner, who has been not any slouch in that McLaren. They've been putting in some very strong lap times, all the way up to 150.1. So they've almost been able to match Simone through here, but Simone has just had that little extra bit more and has been able to eke out that gap just a tiny bit and open things up here. But looking further back as well, Daniel Taberner's championship rival, Luis Alfonso, is also sitting in the background there about 3 seconds back. They're also no slouch, maybe missing a little bit on the top end right now in terms of overall pace, but it looks like they might be benefiting a little bit more from the consistency side of things. They're missing the fastest lap in this battle between P2 and P3, but they've also been able to manage their way into this lead group just purely off of keeping the car consistent and safe. So be interesting to see if that 57's able to close that gap the rest of the way, or if Daniel Taberner maybe has a big mistake on the wet curbs here that puts them all sorts of out of shape. So there's a lot of threat, and anything can change on the curbs, the wet curbs here, as we saw happen with Frey Fireblood in that 26 Aston Martin earlier. It just really opens the door for all sorts of chaos, as now Jesper Swingley continues their charge up the field, now putting the pressure onto the back of the silver-rated driver Charter in the 24 Audi. This is currently the battle for P4 in class, as they are looking to try to close that gap to the silver podium, and currently sitting with the overall podium, then the silver podium in the next 3 positions, all the way from P4 to 6, filled in by our AM leader as well, of Elias Flynn in the 77 Camaro. Then you have these two who are now trying to battle out for that P4 in the silver class. The no texture portion might be a little bit hard to see in the rain here, but it looks like Jesper can see exactly where they want to be, throwing the rear end of that Porsche all over the place and trying to close the gap up the Charger, but it doesn't look like that gap's closing as fast as they would want to. But a good exit out of turn 6 here will probably lend them a little bit more time if they try to just continue this charge up to the Audi. But it's so hard when you can't see where you're going with the spray that's being kicked up by that leading car.
Yeah, fortunately for Jesper, Jesper Swingley, they've been basically on a charge. I think that the fact that the Porsche really does have a little bit more of pointiness in the curves, it's just been helping them out a lot lately for this charge. They are now on the back bumper of Charter, and right now, even though they are fighting, it looks like they are also slowly gaining to Flynn up ahead, as we see Jesper Swingley going a little bit wide. That's going to cost him some time. Another point that I want to point out is that the pit window has opened, so that means we are also going to start seeing people in the pit. And as I say that, I just looked, Frey Fireblood and one other driver has gone into the pit lane to serve their mandatory pit stops. Frey obviously wanting to get that damage dealt with as soon as they can, to see if maybe they can make a recovery drive and maybe gain some positions. As I believe the other driver is Wilson, following still along with Swingley, though. They are slowly but surely gaining on the Audi of Charter, but they haven't been able to kind of set up to make a move. But it should definitely be interesting as we see Jesper get a little bit squirrely going into the corner. Definitely the wet spots have been plaguing a lot of drivers, and now heading down into the next corner. So far, it looks like Jesper is slowly gaining, but not enough to really make a move on Charter.
Yeah, just trying to close that gap. It's a true challenge as you try to close all the ways up. Again, the wet weather, the visibility really proves a challenge. You start to lose your marks the closer you get to that car in front, and it just proves to be a exponential challenge. There's no real draft in the wet weather. The cars don't really get fast enough, so it's so minimal the benefits that you gain from the car in front, and it's really just downside. So Jesper really fighting through quite literally a cloud coming off of the back of the Audi there, as the Audi is also chasing down Elias Flynn. So a good three-way battle here that could really close up at any moment, but I'm not seeing too much progress or inroads coming from either of these cars at the moment. A Charger swinging a little bit wide as Jesper Swingley is trying to swing up to the back of them a little bit deep, it looked like, into turn 14. There's going to be a tiny bit of a time loss as well, but we know that 279 has the pace, and it's going to do everything it can to try to close up and get past this 24, especially for being a class battle. It's super important for Jesper to try to find a way past here.
Yeah, and so far, it looks as if Jesper is, even though they're slowly gaining, they're making enough gains. Here we go. As I say that, Jesper is right closing in on the bumper of Charter, heading down into turn 3. It looks like they may be setting up for the next long straight to see if maybe they can make a move heading down into the slow section. So far, Charter definitely does have the advantage heading out of the last corner, heading down toward the second straight, but it looks like Swingley has a much better exit. This could be the move that Swingley needs. If they maybe try to go for a send, it could work out for them, but I don't know if they will. We'll see. Oh man, it looked like, I think they touched it. They were super close, and it looked like Charter got very loose going into the corner. I think they may have had a very slight touch. That almost could have ended in heartbreak.
Yeah, very easy to make a mistake there, but very well piloted by the two. But Jesper is really trying to file up to the back of the Audi. Again, that cloud kicking up off the back. This is the closest we've seen that gap, 3/10. 2-3/10 has really been where it's been sitting the past couple of corners here. Jesper done a very good job to close it all the ways up and very, very deep. Just look how much more confident Jesper is on the brakes there, closing the gap all the ways up to the rear wing of Charter and able to find the nose right underneath, but a little wiggle is going to cost them a lot of time there as they try to file the car out and get the power down for those last two corners. So Charter is starting to run away with it for this next section here. Jesper just needs to close that gap back up, but it's such a challenge when you can't see anything. We touch on it because that visibility is so important, but imagine trying to run your same exact pace with your eyes closed. You lose all of your references, all of your spatial awareness as the buildings in the background and the trees all disappear. You lose sight of the barriers, and it's very, very easy to make a mistake here that can end your race. So Jesper doing a very good job to continue to close that gap back up, but that challenge, just get their nose underneath that Audi, is proving to be extremely difficult as they continue to pilot through. Possibly won't want to look at a pit stop, but a big wiggle from Jesper coming off that curb at turn 6. We saw how dramatic that can be and the damage that can cause with Frey earlier in the race. So well held by Jesper, who only loses a couple of tenths, but now has a challenge to drive back up to the rear end of this Audi again. This Charter's continuing to drive a mistake-free race, and if Jesper wants to make progress up the standings, they really need to get this move on quick.
Yeah, absolutely. But here's an interesting point. I was just looking, George Shirami, the man that was fighting Frey earlier, they have just gotten a drive-through penalty for track limits. That's going to be huge for Frey, who is now on an absolute recovery drive. That means that Frey may actually have a chance to regain that position. That will get them back in the podium spot, or in the P2 spot. That's going to be huge for them in the championship. So at this point in time, all Frey has to do is drive. As long as they don't make another mistake, they should be good. They're probably going to be relieved to hear about that. And now all Frey has to do is just not get a track limits penalty, and they might be able to make some massive gains here as we follow along with Frey, as they have caught up, I believe, to the back of Wilson here. So far, it'll definitely be beneficial for Wilson. As you see, they're already flashing the lights. They have no interest in being held up by anyone. It is, get out of my way. I am on a tear. Please do not hold me up or cause me to have an accident, as they have as they are now heading into the first sector, and the rain, as you said, has definitely been throwing a lot of drivers off guard, and now Frey looking desperately to try to maybe get ahead, and I'd also like to point out that Wilson is not pitted, so they will have to pit at some point within the 20 minutes, or they will unfortunately have a 30-second penalty, as we see Frey going into the corner, getting incredibly loose, but they were able to hold it, and Wilson gets wisely out of the way, as now Frey only has Sarami to deal with, and since they have that drive-through penalty to deal with, it could be huge for them.
Yeah, looking like, actually, I believe Frey may have came in for their pit stop as well. Saw the front end of that car, looked like it was in much better shape than when we last saw it, so it'll be interesting to see where they're able to climb up to, as Electroshock is trying to climb up a couple positions here. I believe they have also come in for their pit stop as well, so yes, they are the highest position driver that has come in for their pit stop and is now trying to get past Juan Verone, who has not done their pit stop. Just trying to make sure they don't lose any time. This is actually very important because they were in a battle with Ores Volpez and Blade Wolf Kakihio, who have not taken their pit stop. So anytime they lose here, trying to get past Juan Verone is going to cost them in that overall race placement. And I think Ores Volpez and Blade Wolf are gaining quite a bit right now, because it looks like there's quite a struggle for Electroshock to make a move past that Porsche and really find a way through that. Alpine is not liking sitting right underneath the 911 rear's wing. It looks like we're going to be stuck for another couple corners at least, as these really aren't passing opportunities coming into the final sector here.
Yeah, and surprisingly enough, Juan Verone has not pitted yet. They have, I want to say, like 8 minutes left to serve their pit stop, otherwise it will be a penalty. As we can see, another driver coming out of the pit lane. I couldn't see who that was. I think that was Swingley coming out of the pit lane, as they now continue with this battle between Electroshocks and Juan Verone, and that was a very big win from Electroshock. That almost ended in a spin, as we follow along now with the Cabal driver of Juan Verone with that Alpine right on their tail. You can see that the dirty air and the wet weather has not been helping Electro at all. They lost even more time going into the main straight, and that allows the Porsche to just run away with it, heading down into the corner. And unfortunately, Juan Verone is just losing so much time. I think it may come back to bite them if they try to at some point. This is going to be super unfortunate. They were really in the tight fight with Blade and Ores earlier, but now it looks like they will be in a more rough spot.
Yeah, and it looks like it's just proving to be a difficulty as they roll through the sectors and the laps pass, and not being able to get past Juan Verone, and the visibility is causing an issue. The comfort in the car to put a latent move on, and even just the challenge of the reduced grip not allowing you to send the car how you want to. It's really all adding up to costing Electroshots a lot of time here. And rolling through the final corner, they're basically on the rear end of that 911 Porsche, and they need to get away past. A good run out of the final corner here will open things up for them, but it looks like Juan Verone is able to get a good enough exit that Electroshocks isn't able to fill that gap. And setting up into the sector one, they a little bit of a wiggle to try to show themselves, but they aren't able to get a nose in. So if they can't get this move into turn 4, they're going to be stuck for another short sector, just not being able to pass, and it looks like they don't have the run here. So this is tons of time that they are bleeding, and you can actually see in the background for just a short moment, Ores Volpez was up there and completely running away from Electroshock. So this is just costing buckets of time as we look for any kind of progress here. Electroshox needs to make a decisive move. Otherwise, they're going to lose out massively when Blade Wolf comes back out of the pits. Oh, and a big decisive move comes right now into turn 8. Juan is not able to get the run out, so Electroshock's able to make that stick. But possibility of it moving up to the inside of 9. It looks like Electroshox has the confidence to carry that car through there. And now they're going to try to make this run up. They have quite a big gap to claw back towards Volpez and a little bit more to Blade Wolf as well once they come out of the pits. But finally, Electroshox is free and now starting their charge back up to try to take a higher position in that silver podium battle.
That was a send with authority. That was, I am not playing around. Get out of my way. You are not holding this position anymore. That was an absolutely bold move by Electroshox, but it worked out perfectly as they now have open air heading down to the pit lane. And I think at this point, we are now following another battle going on. That is between Charter and Swingly, has finally gotten by Charter at some point. Unfortunately, we did miss it. And now Charter is on the back foot trying to catch up to Swingley. And then right behind them, that is the leader of this race. That is Simon Bellion. So they were going to have to give way for Simon at some point. I'd say within maybe the next lap or two, given the pace, because you can see Simon's like right there. They'll probably be getting blue flags any minute now as they head into the corner. And another wiggle from Charter, and it looks like, unfortunately, I think the tires in that Audi have just given up a little bit, and it is allowed Swingley to get by heading down toward the main straight. And you can see again, it's super loose, but at this point, like, what do? You've got the leader behind you who you will have to give way for, and you have your opponent up ahead, and you're having this what amounts to a rough time due to probably either dirty air or tires, and it's super rough for Charter. Like, what do? You're gonna lose time no matter what.
Yeah, it's the difficulties of running through the mid-pack, especially when the leader catches you. So best thing, truthfully, I think for Charter is once that leader catches up, make sure you lose as little time as possible, and once they start moving past Jesper, try to follow them through. A very easy way to gain some positions if you're able to stick on the back of that leader, at least within a couple of tenths, and it looks like that gap is closing quickly. So very soon Charter's going to need to be aware of this. Make sure that they don't lose too much time when that leader goes to pass them, or ideally just let them by and follow through behind them by a couple of tenths and just take that gap, because you can see a couple blue flags being thrown on the side of the track here, notifying Charter that this is a slower car behind them and that it is the leader in this specific case. So we're looking like Charter's gonna make way at some point here, possibly just not defending when Simone is able to sneak up to the rear end of that Audi, but that gap is closing quick, and it is closing now. Looks like possibly even a move into turn 4. No, it doesn't look like it, but Simone doesn't really have to feel too much pressure about getting past here. And actually letting them by now, but that's a big time loss. A very bad place to pump the brakes if you're trying to stick to the rear end of the leader there. I think Charter had already kind of conceded to the fact that they were going to get overtaken there, especially after throwing the car off track a little bit wide on 4. Sets you up quite poorly for 5, and just didn't want to cost Simone any time.
Yeah, I'd like to point out something that I just noticed. None of the leaders have pitted at all. There is 2 minutes left before pit window closes. This is a dash into pit lane. I just noticed that two of the top 5, Luis Alfonso and Blake Kakimigo, have both gone in to pit lane, and that's going to make things very interesting. I don't know. I'm worried that maybe Simon and David may be caught out to dry. They may get a penalty unless they get in right now.
Yeah, it needs to be coming in very, very quickly. You have 1 minute and 50 seconds, so you need to come in this lap. Otherwise, you are going to be under threat. You at least need to get underneath the pit lane line before that timer expires. You can leave after the timer expires, but you need to be right here at the entry of the pit lane and inside that pit before that window closes. So Simone, just taking that all the way to the end, really, I expect them to just take some fuel, don't really need tires, so most likely won't see the car go up for a new set, but the 314 putting on a very, very dominant display, irregardless of that, running a 149, the only car that is stuck into the 149s, is only 4 cars, including them, have even been able to get underneath the 151s and bank a 150. But Elias Flynn is also needing it to come in for a pit stop. It looks like the last of our drivers, so they need to be coming in right now, right at the end of their stint. The 77 will have to serve their mandated pit stop, and it looks like they will be abiding by that and coming into the pit stop. Just need to set the car up, don't hit those very, very close walls, and hard on the brakes. Get the car on that pit limiter before the pit limiter line, and you're good to go. So all of our drivers have served their pit stop, if not a second one for some of our extreme cases, and Elias Flynn will be serving, as it looks like we have George Shurami, who is going to be taking a challenge against Juan Verone here, the 911 on the inside, heading into turn 1, and George is trying to take that number 10 Aston Martin around the outside of 1 and up to the inside of 2, just clearing them as they head on the exit to 3, and that's going to be the number 10 moving up to P10 and taking another position here, as they now are going to start to mount a charge all the way up to Charter, but I think that gap might be a little bit too big, 57 seconds ahead. This is quite the gap for them, so that charge against Juan Verone is going to be possibly the last battle that they have, but Luis Alfonso has found their way past Daniel Tappiner, so possibly something happening with Daniel Tappiner during the pit stop and getting a little bit closer, but that gap is down to about 1 second, because Daniel was typically faster, but we talked about Luis keeping that consistency, possibly benefiting from a mistake from Daniel, and this gap continues to just close 10th by 10th every single corner. It's sitting about 8/10 back right now down to 7 from the exit phase, so this surely could be a battle as soon as next lap.
This is going to be very interesting. Will low-high rules come into effect heading down toward the main straight? As we said, Dabby Turner has been technically faster than Luis, but we also need to consider Luis has a championship to worry about. They need these points. So it's going to come down to, will Daniel concede this position, or will they try to fight this? Oh, and then there's a little bit of a wiggle coming from Luis Alfonso. That's going to close the gap even more to Daniel. Heading down toward Curva de Misano in the main straight. It's definitely going to be interesting. This is going to be definitely an interesting fight, because both these drivers, they need points. And it's going to come down to who's going to want them more, or who's going to let the other by, or is this going to be a fight to the finish? Heading down toward the main straight, you can see the power of the McLaren heading down toward the main straight. They gained so much time heading down into turn 1, but they aren't able to make the move, and I think Luis went a little bit wide, and then a wiggle from Daniel Tappiner. That, I think, was almost a little bit of a heartbreak. That could have ended. They got pretty close going into the corner, heading down toward the main, heading down toward, I believe this is turn 5 into 6. Now, is this going to be is Daniel going to try to make a move, or are they going to sit behind? You can see Luis Alfonso just kind of pulling away a little bit. I think they had a little bit of a bad exit heading down the main straight. Now heading down into turn 7, I believe 8. Now looking for, I don't think they're going to be looking for a move. I think they're just going to be kind of settling down as we follow yet another battle going on. This is between Charter and Elias Flynn. Look at how close he is to Charter. It looks like they're going to try to maybe set up a move on the main straight, and with the power of that Camaro, they may be able to do it. Heading down out of the corner, it looks like a fairly good launch from Charter. But now here we go. Here's another. We're back to the main battle between Luis Alfonso and Daniel Tappiner. There was a pretty deep cut from Daniel Tappiner. It looks like it's going to gain them a little bit of time heading down toward the next corner. But I think it looks like they are just kind of settling in behind. They're going to wait for maybe another opportunity, maybe down the main straight, and heading. Speaking of, they are now heading down toward the main straight. Let's see what they do. It looks like Daniel is just kind of quietly sitting behind. They're going to maybe try to make a move into turn 1 if they want to. And now Luis Alfonso and Daniel Taverner are getting fairly close. It's going to be very interesting. We're now on board with Daniel Taverner heading into the Sector 1, looking for a turn 3. It's going to be definitely interesting, especially with all that spray. It's definitely going to be nerve-wracking. Both of these drivers, they're not only are they fellow teammates, they are also both technically in the lead of their respective championships, if my memory serves right. Now it comes down to who wants P2 more. Is it going to be Luis or is it going to be David Alfonso?
Yeah, it's going to be a big challenge. Daniel Taberner losing a little bit of progress, though, as Luis has started to open that gap a tiny bit. Just a couple of tenths here and there. We've really seen that tenths can swing either way anytime you come into a corner. So it's going to be a bit of a threat. Daniel Taverner not getting the exit they needed from the turn 10 complex and running through this back section here. The McLaren just trying to haul back in the Mercedes, but Lewis is starting to get a little bit of momentum here, I think, and pull that gap just a little bit tighter. Daniel may be pushing those tires just a little bit more, but it's just a little tenth here and there, and just eking out just a tiny bit. So I think that Mercedes is maybe looking a little bit stronger now in this phase of the race, but that gap, now that I say that, is starting to just eke closed a little bit closer. Maybe not the best corner there from Luis Alfonso. That's going to open the door for Daniel Taberner to get a little bit closer. So every single corner, it's an ebb and flow here. The rain is really unsettling the rhythm of these drivers as we head into turn 1 here. Looks like a very well put together section for Luis Alfonso, and I think possibly a mistake because that gap started to open back up for Daniel Taberner now. So again, just proving to pull these drivers either which way, is now Chargers under more serious threat from Elias Flynn. That Camaro is starting to really put the Audi under pressure. Again, we've seen Charter sit in front of another car for quite some time when Jesper Swingley was putting them under pressure. So we know that they have a heart of iron to be able to manage this pressure, hang on to it. It's just a matter of Elias can get close enough to really put a move down.
Yeah, and it looks like even though we have this this tight fight, I think we've also lost somebody. It looks like we've lost one. Yeah, it looks like we lost one. I believe it's due to an internet connection. I don't know. We'll have to wait until later. Oh, we are getting confirmation. Unfortunately, they had a fairly serious accident and they have unfortunately retired from this race. That is super unfortunate. They were having a very good run of things too. So it is a shame, but you know, that's unfortunately just how things go. We will let you know. We are also getting confirmation that it sounds like their internet has also unfortunately had a hiccup. So unfortunately that would be that. We've got another, oh no, that's a big drive-through penalty for electroshocks. They are also, it is drive-through city today. Everybody is, for some reason, just the corner cuts are real here. I guess it's because of the wet weather or something. But that is, I think, it. Drive-through for track limits today. I want to say it's like either the 4th or the 5th that I've been kind of keeping an eye on as we see now electroshocks is coming in to serve their drive-through. That is super unfortunate. They've had a fairly good race so far, but now we're back with the battle between Elias Flynn and Charter. You can see Flynn slowly but surely gaining on Charter. This is definitely going to be an interesting fight heading down into the main straight, heading toward turn 1. You can see it's almost even as far as power goes between the Camaro and the Audi. It's just who is willing to brake harder or brake later. And it definitely seems like even though Flynn is gaining an advantage every now and again, doesn't seem like they're just able to get that one little move to get ahead of Charter.
Yeah, and I talked about in our opening screens that it was a bit of a risk with all the off tracks here, possible drive-throughs, and it's really starting to shake things up. It's where it becomes important to make sure that you haven't made any mistakes, any crucial mistakes at least, that cost you those off-track warnings. Well, it looks like Charter is being pushed in. Possibly Elias trying to force a mistake here as we come through. Elias was previously ahead of Charter here, so we know where the pace lies. It's just a matter of Charter can hang on for the next 10 minutes here. They can continue to make the life difficult of Elias, as this really is the closest battle that we have on track. Looks like maybe a better exit for the Audi, though, able to sneak its way out of turn 10 and pull a couple of tenths here, setting everything up for the final sector. And it looks like under the brakes, Elias is just so much stronger underneath those brakes. Charter not able to get the car stopped in the same way, and that gap's all the way down to 0.3 of a second now. So Elias Fun really putting the pressure on, but look at the visibility as you come all the ways up onto the rear end of that Audi. It's just so hard to see out the windscreen. The lights even start to disappear that are supposed to cut through. And then immediately get the car set back up for this first sector. As we get all the ways into Daniel Taverner, now closing the gap onto Luis Alfonso as well. The 83 has started to close that gap and is really starting to put the pressure on to the Mercedes as well. And we've seen the McLaren be very, very strong on that top end, so maybe even another opportunity coming into this back section, and it's going to be very, very tight running down into 12, set up the brakes for 13, and Daniel Taverner now trying to set the car up for 14. Oh, and a little bit of braking on the curb, but it looks like Lewis as well also had a bit of a mistake. That gap closes down to nothing but a car length as Daniel is now starting to push the Mercedes through the corner, starting to find a bit more rhythm and a bit more pace, and getting close enough. They're starting to just cut through the end of that smoke cloud, basically, of the rain coming up, and that momentum from the McLaren pushing them all the way up to the rear end. A little bit of a release or maybe a missed gear. It's going to push Daniel back, but into the inside of 2 they look for a move. Luis Alfonso sets that corner back up to get a better exit for 3, open it up and pull away from Daniel Taverner a little bit, just enough, but they're on that exit curb, unsettling the car a little bit of traffic as well, just to set things up and push Lewis a little bit further back into Daniel, and there's going to be a hard brake from Lewis to avoid the traffic. Or hard brake from Daniel trying to sneak their way through as well through the kink of 7, and this could be an open opportunity for the McLaren, but they settle back in line. Luis Alfonso leading once again into turn 8, and Daniel trying to keep it clean. Remember, these two are teammates, so they aren't trying to take each other out, but Daniel does still have their own championship battle to look for, closing the gap just a tiny bit as we set up for 10. We saw the McLaren gain a little bit of time as we rolled out of turn 10 last time here. A little bit better momentum and energy in the power unit for that McLaren, but I think Lewis has just got enough of a gap to keep them out of threat. The McLaren tipping it into 13. We saw a big moment for both cars, and another moment from Daniel getting a little bit loose coming into 14. So Luis Alfonso is going to be keeping that gap sitting at just about a second now after a little bit of small mistakes. Pulls Daniel back, and again, Daniel has the pace. They've had the pace over this race, but Lewis has just kept it consistent, kept it together, and it looks like if they can hold it for 7 more minutes, they'll be able to take this T2.
Yeah, it's super tight. The other thing they need to really worry about is that if they need to worry about track limits. We've been getting nothing but track limits, and
And so as we roll through the first sector again, the 57 is still being tracked down through by the McLaren, but it looks like Luis Alfonso, actually another big slide for Daniel Taverner, so those curbs are really proving to be a threat for the number 83, the McLaren, not too prone for kicking the rear out, so it's just purely the lack of grip on those exit surfaces, really unsettling the 83, and it's proving to be a little bit of an advantage for Lewis. I think if Daniel just knocked that back down by maybe just 1% just to keep the car off of those curbs, keep those exits straight, they might be looking at some kind of opportunity into one of these corners in the near future. But every time they get close, they just push it a little bit too hard, kick that rear out, and start to lose the car a little bit, struggling to close that gap even further as using all of the curb here for both cars. Again, we've seen drama through this part of the track the past couple of laps. Luis Alfonso pilots it through quite nicely. Daniel Taverner with just a tiny wiggle as they set up for braking, and then into turn 14, it looks like both cars able to pilot their way through, but Luis just a little bit cleaner. That Mercedes just seems to be so strong in that final sector, especially the braking from 13 and 14. They're able to just open up that gap a little bit more, and Daniel Taverner really throwing that car around just to try to get that car up to the rear end of the 3-star machine.
Yeah, and so far it's been working out. I'm wondering if that maybe Daniel and Luis have just kind of agreed to just kind of keep it clean, and I don't think Taverner's going to really fight this, mainly to preserve not only their championships, but to preserve the race, just because of how unstable this race has been. And with all of the drive-thrus, it may be the smartest move to, look at just keeping it clean. But you can't really not push for long, because look who's catching up. That is Oraz in the other Ginetta. I think this fight and these little mistakes have culminated in this turning into a 3-way fight. Unfortunately, Daniel's going to have to do something here in order to kind of keep Daniel, or in order to keep Oraz at bay. This is definitely going to turn into a very interesting fight heading down toward the back straight. Remember, the McLaren and the Mercedes will definitely have a speed advantage over Oraz in the main straights, but that's not going to mean much, especially in these tighter sections. And the other thing they need to really worry about, again, is these little mistakes that the two of them have been kind of making every now and again, and it could culminate into a move for Oraz. This could be a fight between Oraz, Alfonso, and Daniel for the podium spots. And now, following along with George Cerami, they have caught up to the back of Frey Fireblood. Remember, Frey had not only an accident, they also had a drive-through, and they've been able to claw it back because of either these drive-throughs or Cerami having to back out and let them by, or let blue flags by. It has paid dividends for Frey, but now they have 2 minutes to hold off this Aston Martin. It is going to be a repeat of what happened earlier. This is going to make things very interesting for the final few laps of this race.
Absolutely, and we've seen a couple of gaps close up. A gap that we haven't talked about is Oraz Volpez is actually closed all the ways up onto the back of Daniel Taverner as well. Sitting at about 1.3 seconds. They have no pressure behind. And we talked about Oraz possibly sneaking onto the overall podium or a win. Well, here's your opportunity to see if they can get that Ginetta onto that overall podium. Currently, they lead the silver class by a convincing 22 seconds to the next silver class car behind them, and they're really looking to put a charge on and maybe close up to the back end of the 83, especially if that 83 continues to make a few mistakes. That could be an opportunity for Oraz, or maybe even if the 83 pushes all the ways up to the back of Lewis and is able to put a move on that, just continues to open the door. But it looks like the cars up front, they're starting to get backed up. There's a little bit of traffic ahead of them that is costing them a tiny bit of time. I think Luis Alfonso now starting to feel the effects of the draft, really the rooster tails that are being kicked up from the back of these cars, throwing rain all over the inside windscreen as it's going to get out of the way there, but a little bit of time loss for each of our cars here. The 83 not able to fully clear them as we head into turn 1, or as Volpez also now needing to navigate the lap traffic. But that gap closes up to about 5/10 of a second, but didn't look like the best section for Daniel Taverner, looking like they might be losing out a little bit in the background, whereas Volpez also sneaking on through. So each of these cars could be sitting on your podium in a 1 minute's time here, setting up for the final lap. And Luis Alfonso just needs to hold this car together. They've been able to keep that consistency, keep them ahead of Daniel Taverner, who is wiggling all over the curb, even possibly an off-track warning there as they get the car all sorts of unsettled over that exit curbing there, getting into turn 8, but coming out of the final turn 16, Electroshock's now putting pressure on to the back end of Charter. Elias Flynn was able to sneak through earlier, and Electroshock trying to sneak around the outside, but no grip out there for the 75. And as they're trying to get the car set up through turn 1, they were just trying to send a Hail Mary send, and as they slide the car through turns 3, getting the car picked into turn 4, they are just ragging that Alpine to try to do anything they can to sneak past the Audi, which is looking extremely lackadaisical and struggling to pilot. The final lap comes to a close as Simone, right as time expires, collects the checkered flag. So this will be the final lap for everyone in each of our battles. So all Luis Alfonso needs to do is pilot this car through the final sector and keep them ahead of Daniel Taverner, and they will be doing exactly that with one corner left to navigate. It's going to be Luis Alfonso taking P2, Daniel Taverner P3, and the winner of your silver race is going to be, whereas Volpez, who almost stuck themselves onto the overall P3.
Yeah, absolutely good job by Oraz for not only securing that silver win, but almost securing a podium. We are now back on the other battle between Electroshocks and Charter. This is going to be the fight. There's only a few turns left, and that will be that as we see Electroshocks go super wide. That's going to be huge. That's going to be a huge issue. I think they are just sending it, trying to make as much room as they can. And now I think that'll unfortunately be that, as they head down toward the final corner. Charter is going to secure P8, while Electroshocks will secure P9, and Indigo Lopez, who has had a fairly rough race with drive-thrus and I think an incident, is going to secure a top 10.
Yeah, but a very, very well done race from the 314 Simone Bellon, who's been able to take the Ginetta to a very, very strong position, over 20 seconds ahead of anyone else, putting on a absolutely dominant performance in their home track as they come through. The Italian wins in Italy and it takes the Ginetta to the top step of the podium, and a very, very well-deserved race for them, as we know their pace, and a very, very strong result as well. But that brings everything to a close, and we look at a round that has truthfully unsettled the top of the championship standings in multiple classes. So it'll be interesting to see how the second half of this championship unfolds, as we see everyone try to chase down the rest of the championship. We take a look once again, Simone Bellon looking like your championship winner. Luis Alfonso and Daniel Taverner taking the second and third position on that overall podium. Oraz Volpez, the winner of your silver class with Blade Wolf Kagakio, and Jesper Swingley taking the second and third positions there. Elias Flynn, who has been proven to be a pretty strong AM driver, is taking their Camaro all the way up to the AM class win as well, with Free Fireblood and Surami as well taking the final podium spots in that AM class. So Free Fireblood doing a good job to recover from that quite large accident that we saw. But a very tricky round coming in from Misano here. The rain proving to be not only a small effect, but a large feature on an already quite technical circuit.
We
But
were
as
we were sorry. We were absolutely expecting this in this wet weather, but you know, I want to give hats off to all of them because even with the wet weather, we did not get a single first course yellow the entire race. It was a fairly, despite the mistakes, we didn't really have any major incidents. We did absolutely have that amazing save from Swingley that could have ended in so many horrible ways, but they were able to save it and probably do one of the most amazing double passes I think I've ever seen. I think this is going to be one to remember, and I definitely say I cannot wait for round 4 next week.
Yeah, so it was quite an interesting one as we head on over. Again, the halfway point of the season has been marked now. Next time out, we go just down the street to Imola, staying in Italy for the second half of the championship, opening up October 12th. Same time, same type of cars, and we're going to be looking at who's able to benefit most from this championship shakeup. But looking through the grid, there's so many drivers that were impressive. It's hard to really put a name on it, but you'd have to probably go with Orez stepping above and beyond once again. They've had a drive at Bathurst, they've had now a drive at Misano. I think it's almost a matter of time until they're able to seek their way on that overall podium.
I agree. Orez did an amazing job, kept it clean. However, I don't know. I gotta say that move from Swingley, that from what could have been an absolute tragedy to not only saving it but gaining a position. I mean, you've got to give hats off to him. That could have ended in such a bad way. They were able to save it, and they were able to gain a position. They will probably be wiping the sweat or the puddle that is probably in their helmet from that move alone. So I gotta give it to them because personally I think they did a great job.
Yeah, so again, very, very impressive round at the Misano circuit. It has been a great one here at Simufur. It has been the end of round 3. This is Jordan Johnson with Wolfin Foxdale. We are signing off. We will see you over in round 4. Good night.
Good night.